This lecture was delivered by Aziz Rajpari on July 2019, on the topic of free will, with an emphasis on the topic of proofs and arguments. Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're really getting into something profound, something humans have wrestled with forever, really. That tension, between free will and, divine predestination.
A big one.
Huge. And it's not just some dusty academic debate, is it? It hits right at the core of our existence, our choices, our accountability. It's something I think everyone feels at some point.
Absolutely. It's deeply personal, theological, existential, all of it. And our mission today, looking at Aziz Rajpari's lecture, is really to explore the strong arguments for human free will, even within that divine plan.
Right.
We want to unpack what that actually means for us, for our responsibility, our spiritual path. The lecture really encourages engaging with this paradox head on.
Okay, let's unpack this then. The lecture jumps right into that central, almost dizzying question. If Allah has already written everything, how can we as humans be held responsible for what we do?
Exactly. It's a question believers genuinely grapple with, a kind of lived spiritual reality, as the lecture puts it.
Oh, lived reality. Yeah.
And rather than just dismissing free will or saying it's all fate, the approach here is more about deep reflection. It pushes you to think about divine justice, accountability, personal responsibility.
And how that connects to our own choices, the ones we make every single day and the consequences we see.
Precisely. It asks for a deeper look than maybe we're used to.
And here's where it gets really interesting, I think. The lecture doesn't just rely on philosophy. It grounds this idea of choice firmly in the Quran.
Yes, very much so. It highlights key verses that really underscore this divine gift of choice.
Can you give some examples? What verses are we talking about?
Sure. There's Surah Al-Insan, verse 76, verse 3. Indeed, we guided him to the way, be he grateful or ungrateful. Clear choice presented there.
Grateful or ungrateful, right?
Then you have Surah Al-Ankabut, 29.69. As for those who strive in our cause, we will surely guide them to our paths.
Strive, so there's effort involved on our part.
Exactly. The lecture really emphasizes that point. Divine guidance tends to follow human striving. It's not forced upon us. Belief, disbelief, these are things exercised through free will, not coercion.
So the Quran itself presents this duality choice and the resulting accountability.
It's woven right into the fabric of the text.
Okay. So we have the strong Quranic foundation, but the lecture, as you said, goes further. It brings in rational, logical arguments, too.
Yes, and these are quite powerful on their own.
What are some of those? How does the logic work?
Well, the basic premise is this. If our actions were completely predetermined, totally outside our control.
Then what's the point of justice?
Exactly. Reward, punishment, they lose all meaning, don't they? Why praise someone or, hold them accountable for something they couldn't help doing?
It wouldn't make any sense.
None. So accountability itself only makes sense if a person actually can make a choice. That capacity is fundamental.
And that leads to ethics, I suppose.
Right. Free will is presented as the very foundation of ethics. Without it, concepts like sin or virtue, good or bad actions, they just dissolve. There's no moral weight. And the lecturer uses a really helpful metaphor here. It says life is like a game designed by God.
Okay.
He sets the rules, the playing field, the laws of physics, maybe the spiritual laws too. But each player, that's us, humans, chooses how they play within those rules.
I like that. So God's will sets the structure, but our will operates within it.
Precisely. It shows divine will and human will working in harmony, not necessarily clashing.
That game analogy really resonates. It avoids making it seem like God's will is just restrictive. It's the framework for our choices.
It enables the game, so to speak.
Now, shifting focus a bit to our inner world, the lecture talks about the nafs, the soul, and its journey. How does this fit in with free will?
Ah, yes, the nafs. This is a crucial layer. The lecture outlines 3 main stages the soul can progress through, and crucially, this progression hinges on our free will.
It's not automatic, then?
Definitely not automatic. First, there's the nafsi amara. This is often translated as the soul that commands evil, or maybe just the base ego, the impulsive self. Progressing requires actively resisting those impulses, using your will.
Okay, stage 1, resistance.
Then comes the nafsi lawama, the self-reproaching soul. This is where you start holding yourself accountable. You feel remorse for mistakes, you reflect, you try to learn. Again, this requires conscious effort and choice.
So reflection and accountability.
And finally, the highest stage mentioned is the nafsi mutmainna, the soul at peace, the tranquil soul. This isn't just reached by chance, it's achieved through consistent striving, purification, seeking closeness to the divine.
through using that free will deliberately for growth.
Exactly. The lecture is clear. It demands intention, struggle, and reflection. It's an active path we choose to walk or not.
It really emphasizes the effort involved. And this brings us back to that balance you mentioned between divine will and human will. The lecture seems careful to show that destiny isn't just fatalism, right? It's not like we're puppets.
Absolutely. It makes a very nuanced point here. Allah is the ultimate planner, the ultimate source of reality, yes. But within that divine system, human beings are granted real autonomy.
The players in the game.
The players in the game, exactly. Revisiting that analogy, Allah designs the game, sets the rules, the universal laws. But within that structure, we make choices that determine our path, our journey.
So divine will provides the boundaries, the possibilities, maybe.
Yes, the framework. And human will navigates within those boundaries. This view sees destiny not as a rigid script we're forced to follow, but as a divine context that actually gives value and meaning to our actions and choices.
That's a much more empowering perspective, isn't it?
It really is. It shifts from helplessness to participation.
So if free will is this central, this powerful, how do we actively use it? Does the lecture suggest practical ways to exercise this will deliberately to align it with a higher purpose?
Yes, it does. It links free will directly to spiritual practices, showing how these disciplines help us refine our will and focus our intention.
Like what sort of practices?
Well, things like Zikr, the remembrance of God. This helps keep the soul mindful, present, less distracted by the ego or worldly things.
Okay, remembrance.
Then tasbihat, praising God. This cultivates humility, makes us more aware of the divine attributes, and perhaps less focused on our own self-importance.
Humility, right.
And Giri Elzari, which is weeping and supplication. This is seen as a way to purify the heart, to express vulnerability and surrender to the divine will, consciously choosing that surrender.
So these aren't just rituals, they are tools for shaping the will.
Exactly. They help build the consciousness and discipline needed to, well, battle the ego, as the lecture puts it, and align ourselves with a divine purpose. It also mentions ATCAF's spiritual retreat or detachment.
Like a training period.
Sort of, yes.
Yeah.
Not just the retreat itself, but the goal is cultivating lifelong internal awareness, becoming like those mentioned in the Quran who remember God constantly, whatever they're doing.
That constant awareness sounds like a high goal.
It is. And the lecture gives a concrete example, the 40-day tasbihat. It suggests that when done with real sincerity, this intensive practice can lead to noticeable internal changes.
Such as?
Purification of thoughts, a cleansing of negative emotions like anger, less attachment to worldly things, and, importantly, a shift from doubt towards divine certainty. It's presented as a process of transformation powered by disciplined choice.
That's quite specific. It's interesting how practical the lecture gets. Does it also touch upon maybe the psychological side of things? How does this relate to our mental well-being day to day?
It absolutely does, and this is a point that maybe doesn't get enough attention sometimes. The mental health benefit of spiritual awareness.
How so?
The lecture suggests that living without that spiritual direction, without exercising that will towards purpose, can lead to a kind of inner emptiness, a hardness of heart, it calls it, which can manifest as depression eventually. You might see people who seem disconnected, maybe showing anger, boredom, a short temper, even if they have material wealth. There's something missing.
That feeling of emptiness despite having everything.
Exactly. Conversely, the lecture argues, aligning yourself with divine remembrance, using your will in that direction, brings inner peace, a sense of meaning, and greater emotional resilience. It affects your whole being.
That makes a lot of sense. We often see that search for meaning playing out. But what about the flip side? What does the lecture say happens if we ignore this gift, if we reject our free will or just let it atrophy?
There are consequences described as kind of spiritual deterioration.
Okay.
When people neglect this aspect of their being, their hearts can become hard, sort of unresponsive to spiritual truths.
How does that show up?
It might start with questioning the basics. You know, why should I give charity? Why follow guidance? Why obey these commands? It's a subtle shift away from trust and submission.
Doubts creep in.
Yes, and left unchecked, the lecture warns people can drift away from spiritual life. They might start missing prayers, avoiding community worship, maybe losing that connection or love they felt for spiritual figures or principles.
And the lecture sees this not just as ignorance, but as a choice.
It frames it as voluntary neglect, a turning away, even if it's gradual, from that divine connection that's always available. It's a consequence of not actively choosing the path of engagement.
That's a sobering thought. It really underscores the responsibility that comes with this freedom. So if we were to boil it all down, looking back at everything we've discussed from the lecture, what are the core takeaways for someone listening?
Right, the distillation. I think there are several key points. First and foremost, free will is real. It's divinely granted, and it's absolutely central to Islamic spirituality as presented here.
Okay, free will is real.
Second, the Quran itself constantly affirms human responsibility, alongside God's mercy, of course. The two go together.
Responsibility and mercy.
Third, spiritual growth isn't passive. It requires your active participation, deliberate effort, conscious submission. You have to choose it.
It takes work.
Fourth, the soul evolves through these choices we make. It's not some automatic upgrade. It's shaped by how we use our will.
Our choices shape our soul.
Fifth, those spiritual practices we talked about, Zikr, tasbihat, supplication, they are vital tools. They help refine our intention and bring our will into harmony with the divine.
Tools for alignment.
Sixth, neglecting this awareness, living as if we don't have free will, leads down a path of spiritual stagnation, inner conflict, and disconnection from faith.
Ignoring it has real costs.
And finally, perhaps the overarching message is that every single person is called to actively choose. Choose love, use remembrance, choose submission. It's an ongoing, active invitation.
That's a very clear and powerful summary. It really brings home that we're not just observers in our own lives. We have this incredible agency, this gift. It really makes you think, doesn't it? How am I actually using this gift today, right now?
Exactly. This lecture ultimately isn't just abstract theology. It feels like a call to reclaim your own spiritual power. It's saying life isn't about being helpless. It's about empowered participation within a divine framework.
Empowered participation. I like that.
The struggle, the remembrance, the submission, that whole journey is presented as the way to transform inner weakness into strength, to turn doubt into certainty, and that feeling of separation into a feeling of union.
The ultimate goal being closeness to the divine.
Yes, that intimacy, becoming one, as the lecture might put it, with the will of the beloved. It's in that very tension, that dance between our choice and divine destiny, that the real beauty and potential of our spiritual growth lies.
A beautiful place to pause for now.
Indeed.
Thanks for listening. We will be back with more reflections and insights coming your way soon in part 2 of the podcast on free will with emphasis on submission. Until next time, take care and stay inspired.